Hey guys, so this is basically a continuation from my previous guide. I've been asked by a lot of people to redo it with a voiceover instead, so here it is. So this is the order the video is going to go in. I'm going to start with reviewing what I did wrong in my first video, then go over the general opener, crowd control, threat management, cooldowns, the healer, common mistakes, and where tanks fit in the general scope of things. So one of the problems with my original guide is I just use text to describe everything. I mean, it's not that this is bad or anything, but the issue with it is it's not in real time. You just have to stare at the text and the action bar to see what's going on, what to do. There were also these moments where I basically just sped the video up and went through it with just music playing, and you have to stare at what is going on based on the action bar, and I wasn't doing anything, really, other than just tanking. I could have cut it out of the video, but I didn't. So now that I've gone over a couple of mistakes with my last video, let's go ahead and cut into this video. Now, right here, I'm going to cover the general opener, which is pretty much the opener you're going to use for everything. As you can see, I've got just two targets up here, so I'm going to go ahead and mark them up with the X on one of them, skull on another, charge in. First things I hit were rend and cleave. Next thing is thunderclap, and then revenge. From then on, using defensive cooldowns whenever you can, watching out for anything that mobs do. If they start casting something, then you're going to want to interrupt it. For example, I'm saving my shockwave to try and stun them because they do this call flame moves that they're doing right now. It can only be interrupted after it's cast or during its cast, and with the stun, basically no normal interrupt will actually work with it. So it really helps if you know the pulls in advance. If you know what to do from the start, it's relatively easy. So the next thing I want to cover is crowd control. You can't really tell from the nameplates due to the distance right now, but this is a mob of 3, and my group has a shaman and a hunter in it, so I'm going to go ahead and mark a skull, a trap, and a hex. The only problem is there wasn't any hex since the shaman didn't want to CC. Also, watch out for patrols. Plan accordingly if you need to, like extra CC. I didn't wait for it to go back though, since I figured it would just be a 2-pool with it if we actually got our CC off. So once the boss goes away, hunter trapped, and I did heroic throw for the silence to bring the caster toward us since there was a caster in the pack. And noticing that the shaman was not hexing at all, I just decided to go in, rend, thunderclap, and proceed with a pretty typical AoE rotation. So, threat. Threat is typically very easy for me. I've never actually had very many problems with threat, but it's, for the most part, just making sure nobody else picks up anything off of you. That usually just happens if someone's wailing on something else while you're not looking. But in a larger pool like this, the main things you're going to want to keep an eye on are shockwave, revenge, cleave, and staring at people to make sure they're not smashing something else, like that warrior was there, but luckily he killed it before it became any kind of an issue, so that always helps. Here's one of the things that makes tanking really distinguishable if you're actually good at it, using your cooldowns. So I'm on the boss here. I'm just opening up with a couple of single target moves to get some threat going. He does a mortal strike that reduces the healing you receive, so knowing this, I'm saving my shield wall for it. Here you can see the mortal strike went up, and I used shield wall to reduce the amount of damage I took during the duration of the mortal strike. This is a little bit later in the dungeon. On this pull, I accidentally pulled a bit too many mobs with me. So basically these fire guys, they do AoE damage, and each of the little quicksilver that you pull also hit the tank for a lot. So I went ahead and picked up the big guy off the DPS with a taunt, started to pick up the littler adds, and noticing that the healer was having a bit of trouble, I threw up last stand and rage regeneration to make it so the healer didn't have to heal me, and the healer could heal the group instead. And on that note, I'm going to go over the healer, which is basically your lifeline. You're going to want to have a really good relationship with the healer. If your healer is drinking, you need to know this, and you do not want to pull while the healer is drinking, and you're gonna want them to obviously have mana to be able to heal you. I mean, the problem I see with a lot of tanks in some of my dungeons on my DPS or on my healer is they do not let their healer get mana between pulls. They totally disregard their healer's mana in general. I'm not saying that you need to wait all the time for them to drink, just whenever they need to drink and you notice it, then don't pull while they're drinking. So here's something to keep in mind. The more that the healer is healing you, the less they're able to heal the DPS. Also, the more they're healing you, the more mana they're using on you. If your healer is running out of mana or having problems keeping you up, or you're taking just too much damage, you're going to need to start using those cooldowns and keeping yourself alive along with the healer keeping you alive. Sometimes it can just be too much damage for them to heal. A lot of tanks blame their healers wrongly. Which basically brings me to my next topic, which is the common mistakes that a lot of tanks make. One of the main ones, as I was just saying, is blaming their healer. They can't always heal through the damage. For some reason, they just think that because they aren't getting healed enough to live, their healer is bad, which I've had happen to me a lot on my druid, and it just makes me angry to see people be so arrogant with how much damage they're taking and with their job in general. Another one is not picking up threat on something they don't have aggro on. For some reason, some tanks just let the mob keep wailing on the DPS and don't even bother picking it back up. They just focus on whatever they're currently on and treat it just like DPS, and don't even care about the whole idea of threat and making sure the mobs are on you. The other thing I see a lot is tanks in DPS gear. It doesn't really make much sense to me, but apparently people think that such a small amount of avoidance doesn't make that big of a difference at all. The truth is that it does. All of the min-maxing and everything like that is very much amplified in tanks. There are a lot of mobs hitting you at the same time, there's a lot of damage incoming, and basically every bit of damage you take has its own chance to just simply be avoided or reduced. Like, say you have 10% prolly on your stat sheet. If there are 3 mobs on you, then that's pretty much 30% prolly in value. Of course, it's not 30% prolly on the actual sheet, but in terms of how much you're actually getting out of it, it's about 30%. And now I'm just going to go over where you exactly fit in the larger scope of things. As the tank, if anything goes wrong, usually you're the person that fixes things. For example, on this pull, my hunter died because he forgot to use his frost traps on the ads. So I ran over and I decided to pick them up off of him, but he died before I could actually save him due to the dot that was on him with the healing reduction, and now I'm just kind of kiting the ads, and when I start getting low on health, I try and get some distance from them using Intervene or Heroic Leap to try and drop the stacks so the healer can heal me up a bit. And basically, we actually downed the boss because I just managed to pick it up, and if we had a B-res, we might have been able to actually pick it up with the hunter, but we didn't, so I just kind of did it in a manual way, but just having the ads follow me around. So, back on the subject, the tank is basically, they're always the leader of the group. People always look to them as the leader of the group. Of course, a DPS or a healer can also fulfill the role, but it's a lot less common, and people usually just look up to the tanks as the leaders. So, if you're gonna tank, or if you want to tank, or you're used to tanking, then just keep in mind that you're gonna end up being the leader of the group most of the time. So make sure you know the fights. If you don't know the fights, it's always a good idea to look them up and just help your group mates to get through the dungeon if you can. Don't be one of those tanks that just yells at everyone and is like all getting angry at everyone if they don't do exactly what they want them to do, and improvise, honestly. If it's not going the way you want it to go, improvise, or let them know that this is how you want things done. Of course, go about it in a friendly manner. Don't exactly say, hey, do this now, you know, just say, hey, can you please CC this target, you know? So, that's about all I have to offer. If there's anything else you need to know, just send me a message over YouTube. And that's it. Peace, guys.
This is me.